The review of Key Stage 3 is going to organise the curriculum, or ask you to organise the curriculum, around key concepts, interdependence, physical and human processes that cause change, place and space, and of course diversity. And it might be an interesting challenge to say, right, those are the keystone concepts of geography. We've got a topic called climate change. Now how do we marry the two together?
The new geography curriculum is evolving to meet a rapidly changing world and is designed to create greater flexibility for schools and teachers. These proposals move us away from a one-size-fits-all curriculum to one that offers more flexibility to tailor teaching to people's needs and aspirations. At Hampstead School in London, geography teacher Dave Dixon is joined by David Lambert from the Geographical Association and climate change expert Ed Gillespie to discuss the best ways of teaching climate change.
Well, I'm interested to ask David whether you've got anything in mind for your lessons on climate change coming up.
It's a bit of a scary topic for us. I think it's such a massive topic that there's sort of where to begin and where to end. Just it causes so many problems when you're thinking about lessons on climate change, because it's so interconnected with so many other things that I think finding a starting point in teaching is a hard thing to do.
I don't think you're alone in facing the challenge of how to break down such an enormous topic which is so interconnected and interrelated. So how you make it more accessible or make it more relevant or break it down into some kind of, not necessarily bite-sized chunks, but definitely things that kids can relate to and find it a little bit more digestible.
How does geography help us understand climate change?
Today then, we're going to look at how humans have influenced this greenhouse effect process. Okay, we're going
to begin with, we do need a lesson, maybe two lessons, on what is climate change. That would allow pupils to understand the global processes behind the impacts, which are often locally felt. And so you can bring in the whole system, physical system, but also economic system with local effects. What sort of content would come into that lesson in your mind?
Maybe steering away from the science ideas, because I think that's kind of, that's being banged into kids for quite a while. Whether they understand it or not, there's still some misconceptions around it. But it's got to move on, hasn't it, before kids just turn off, I think.
We understand the science and we trust it. We know climate change is happening. Maybe a conversation with the science faculty in the school. And maybe other departments as well, because there's nothing worse, I think, for students to repeatedly come across familiar content.
Just from a geography perspective, again, it's very interesting when you look at where the emissions are coming from, i.e. who's accountable and reducing them, and actually who is likely to get the worst impacts of climate change. And if you map those two things, you find that the developed nations, where most of the carbon emissions are being generated from, or where most responsibility for carbon emissions lies, then you find that they're least likely to be impacted by the worst effects of climate change in the short term. And if you look at the developing countries who are going to get it in the teeth, they're the ones who are least responsible for the carbon. So there's this incredible international economic and climate vulnerability disparity, which is really obviously a great topic for a geography lesson.
And tell me, please, what likely effects are we going to see to our planet if temperature rises continue as they have been for the last few decades?
The polar ice caps will melt, which could cause the sea levels to rise.
Excellent. So melting glaciers, melting polar ice caps. Okay, what else? We've got flooding, we've got sea level rise. What other things? What other effects might there be?
In the mid-Atlantic Ocean, there's a current, and if the current gets affected, then the whole temperature of the UK will change.
Excellent.
And then you'd follow that up, like bringing it immediately back to kind of a very locally and personally relevant kind of contribution. Say, what's climate change got to do with me? So actually doing the carbon footprinting exercises, both with individual pupils, perhaps the class as a whole.
What kind of things that we do can cause carbon to be emitted into the atmosphere? What parts of our lifestyle cause carbon to be emitted in the atmosphere? And I want to make a list of these.
Like leaving your things on standby.
Excellent, brilliant, okay.
Using too much water.
Okay, using water, excellent. Yeah, stop here.
and then tying that back to UK emissions, global targets, maybe the kind of relationship with the Kyoto Protocol and the notion of contraction and convergence, and how do my emissions compare with those of other people around the world, perhaps within the people in the class, other people in the UK, and to really get a benchmark and say, well, we're all personally responsible, and this is our contribution to this global challenge. Most of the carbon offsetting sites have a carbon calculator on them. So if you get kids to find out how much their parents' gas and electricity bills are, what the average mileage is on the car, do they fly away abroad, where do they do their shopping, you can do crude calculations on most of those, and then you can almost have a benchmark and say, well, who's got the biggest carbon footprint in the class?
Yeah, so the celebrity stuff would be quite good, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
this is
definitely.
yours, now look at other people's.
We're going to look at two people. All right, two people. The first person is this gentleman. Anyone heard of him? David Beckham. The other superstar we're going to talk about is this gentleman here. That's Mr. Pittaway. There he is. Okay, which one's the biggest superstar? Obviously, Mr. Pittaway, your fantastic head of year and superb science teacher. Okay, we're going to be looking at how much CO2 these guys are responsible for putting in our atmosphere. Okay, so how much global warming are these guys responsible for? Have you got any inkling about who might be responsible for the most carbon?
Maybe Beckham probably uses more carbon than Mr. Pittaway.
Why do you think that?
Because he's got like loads of kids and he's got a wife and yeah, so he probably use. Yeah, but still, he's got a bigger house and everything.
Okay,
so yeah.
good. All right, so bigger house might be one thing. What else?
What's it to do with me? I suppose it's to do with individual lifestyle and carbon production in your everyday life. And so that's when you come in with a calculator so that the children can calculate their own carbon emissions. But then I think the next stage is to use that as a platform to look regionally in the country, but then perhaps internationally, to make comparisons.
We're going to work out his total carbon usage, all right? His total carbon emissions for his heating, his electricity, cars, flights, and his overall consumption. And then we're going to come to a total. In kilos, we're going to do the same for one for Mr. Pittaway, okay? We've got to do the similar sort of thing for electricity use. Small, medium, large house, times by a different figure, and then divide by the number of people that live in that house. So what have you done for this first one, Leanne? 28,000, 2,800, what's that?
He has 3 large houses.
Yeah, 3 large houses. Careful, that's supposed to be 28,000, yeah, correct that. So 28,000 times by 3, because it's 3 large houses, right? Times by 0.19. Good. Divided by 5, because he's got
3 sons.
He's got posh spice and his 3 sons. Good. So that's 3,192 kilos. Right, brilliant. We've got Pittaway roughly 8 tons, and Beckham on about 36.
So if we could get carbon footprints for sort of Britain, Bangladesh, USA, and then look at what those carbon footprints are made of, or why, the percentage transport, percentage domestic use, and so on, and then do something where we can compare them and ask why, why do we have this much percentage of use in transport? So we can talk about levels of development and equality, opportunity for lots of questions, isn't it?
Okay. And this map, I've used this map because this is the total emissions for the world. Do you expect America to be higher or lower than the British figure?
Higher.
Higher. Okay, why do you think that?
Most of them are big.
Most of them are big, maybe, but that means that what? What do they do lots of?
Drive.
They drive lots, they eat lots, okay, they consume a lot.
Those sorts of exercises are brilliant, really engaging, and as a whole class, everyone's working on their own individual thing, and then you can compare them in the class. We don't want to be blaming kids for climate change, is that?
No.
Like, look at your carbon footprint, it's your fault, type of stuff.
Absolutely not. It's more of a sort of we're all in this together. We're human beings and we operate in an economic way, in a social way, and we create carbon.
And maybe we'd think of other routes in to try and find a climate change hook.
Yeah. It's when you talk about them, when they can engage with it because they've had experience of it, because it's applied to them and their lives. And I think that makes really strong learning.
Well, I think one of the key challenges is actually finding a way that young people can relate to their own carbon footprints and the comparability of how those look for other countries around the world.
We've got 14 countries on this page, and then we've got their carbon footprint and the GNP of that country. Okay, we're going to use this to produce a scatter graph. The point of drawing this graph is to show the relationship between, the amount of money a country has, all right, and the amount of carbon it produces.
Then the obvious question from a 14-year-old is, why has it been allowed to happen where there's a real possibility of facing global catastrophe? And I think that's our third big question. In answer to that question, we can bring in a very powerful idea, which is familiar in geography on a number of scales, which is the idea of common land. When the commons are available to all, individuals find it very difficult to take responsibility. And that can be applied to the global setting. And so long as we consist of individual nation states competing, then there is an issue of how responsibly is taken on a global scale to limit carbon emissions. Yeah. Who actually takes responsibility? And so long as the world's divided into 200 or so nation states, it's really difficult. That.
Well, it's the tragedy of the commons. To bring a philosophical element in there, which is obviously at the heart of a lot of kind of geographical dilemmas, is where everyone has a vested interest in exploiting the global commons, but no one wants to take responsibility for the collective impact.
I think our generation will definitely make a difference in climate change. And personally, I want to be really involved in this. I want to make a difference for the whole world, but ecologically. So
I found out that what climate change does to the country and the world and how it will affect us in the future.
Everyone got involved and there were some good, interesting points.
Bringing Kyoto into the sequence of lessons is important because that is the only strategy that we have internationally for making some sense of this.
There is no plan B.
There is no plan B. and I guess, students need to understand that.
Looking at what the solutions are in terms of mitigation and adaptation, and then looking at also what individuals can do and what different groups of individuals can do when they make the right decisions and make the right lifestyle choices. And that can involve some kind of trading of options, if you like, amongst members of the class, because that's essentially what's going to be happening internationally as well in terms of the political system. But keeping it upbeat and the notion that, it's not a case of can we fix this, it's a case of will we.
One of the things that geography as a school subject needs to do right across the curriculum from primary school to sixth form is really make a signal contribution to sustainable development as an idea. So sustainable development has three principal legs: economic, security, social justice, environmental quality. And the whole issue is, how do you teach that incredibly complicated idea? Well, climate change is the answer, really.
You can turn kids into a whole bunch of little climate change activists who are then doing all sorts of things around the house.
What is Grace now?
Teaching climate change is a big responsibility, and I think that should be reflected right through the curriculum, not just in geography, but right through all their lessons. So I think we have a duty, a sort of moral duty to teach this, not just in terms of passing exams, but for their wider social education. So I think it is our duty to take this on.